Welcome back to another episode of the Spicy Brain podcast. On today's episode, we speak about ADHD, ambition, and what it's like to build a career when you have a different brain. Many women get diagnosed with ADHD later on in life, once they've navigated school and work and relationships without really having the answer as to the challenges they face. And on today's episode, we have the most incredible guest. Her name is Ali Bromley. She is a forensic psychologist, an ADHD coach, and she's also won Big Brother in 2024, which is amazing to say the least. We speak about how ADHD has shaped her career and what it's like really to navigate the public spotlight whilst being a neurodivergent woman. Ali, welcome to the Spicy Brain podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to have this chat. I have seen your socials, and that's how I actually found you. And you've been very open about having ADHD and navigating a public life, shall we say, whilst being neurodivergent. But I actually have no idea when you got diagnosed. How was that?
So I got diagnosed in 2021-ish.
Oh, recently.
Yeah, quite recent.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very fortunate I did it privately.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have to navigate all the NHS waiting times and things like that.
Yeah.
So the process for me was pretty smooth and the outcome reasonably unsurprising. It was just a confirmation at that point. But yeah, I was going through a strange time in my life anyway. I think I had been working kind of full-time in the NHS and then part-time, self-employed, doing some prison work, some prison assessments for my forensic psych work. And I think it was the transition between being full-time employed to full-time self-employed where my world kind of came crashing to a halt. And I had this fantasy of self-employed life being much better for how my brain works.
Yeah.
But I was really struggling and looking for answers. So that's why I pursued the diagnosis.
Okay, perfect. So within obviously that transition from being employed to self-employed, which they actually say, obviously, neurodivergent people have a much higher rate of unemployment. And they do say that self-employed life is much better. You own your diary, you own your control, you have your own structure. I've recently transitioned to do that. And I've found it incredibly difficult. Like it's taken me at least 3/4 of a year to find a routine. I still don't have it. So I think, yes, that self-employed life is great, but it is shinier than what it actually is because you need to have that structure in place in order for your world to not crumble.
And I think I was dealing with some form of burnout. There's a question mark over my diagnosis, and I've said this on other podcasts as well, where I query autistic traits. So there was something happening for me around either burnout or overwhelm. I don't know what it was exactly. Yeah. Could have been other things as well, some trauma muddled in with that. But I was having these strange experiences where I was just, I think because my life had been so busy, crammed my working days full. I'd be working 16-hour days sometimes. Wow. I'd be quite sociable as well, performing at quite a high level for years and years and years and years and years. And then I suddenly stopped and I can't describe what happened. I just remember, because this is something I was very ashamed about as well. I remember just sort of lying on my bed in the daytimes when I should have been working.
Girl, relatable. I need a daily nap to survive.
Yeah, but not scrolling, not watching anything, not reading anything, just in this kind of weird fugue where I wasn't even getting up to have a drink or eat. I was just mute. I can't explain. And I would get myself together to go and see a friend or to be with my partner at the time or whatever else it needed to do. But whenever I was on my own, I was sort of shut down. And that was when I was like, I'm not okay. I didn't know if I was depressed or, I suppose once upon a time they would have called it some form of breakdown. Yeah. But really shut down, really shut down. And I've not had an experience. I have sort of moments like it since, but it was, days and then weeks of these just shutting down and shutting down after years of being highly productive and busy.
It's kind of like your system telling you you've operated at such a high level for so long.
Yeah.
I'm forcing you to take a step back. So those shutdowns they're just so common. And I think it's one of the forms of autism and ADHD that shows in women. And the stereotype would be meltdowns, which, a kid would, in public spaces, what people know of, start screaming and losing control. But in reality, the female version of that is a shutdown in which you become more mute. In my case, I go nonverbal and I'm just like there, and I call it rotting, but it's exactly as you say, like TV might be on, but I'm not watching, I'm not registering, I might be scrolling, but I'm not retaining any information. I'm just frozen mentally and physically and want to do things, but the inability is so grand that I just can't move.
And I have moments like that now, but nothing like what I had at that period of time. And I was in therapy at the time, but it was psychotherapy, and she had no background or learning or understanding, I don't think, of neurodivergence. It wouldn't have, what I probably would have benefited from at that point was some signposting. But I remember describing this experience to her, and she understood it within the framework that she understood it as a dynamic psychotherapist. And she sort of suggested that it was an unconscious wish to die because I was just lying and not taking care of myself, not even getting a glass of water, even though I was lying there really thirsty. And that didn't ring true for how I was feeling. So I started exploring other options. But I guess that really highlights the need then for the therapists that we have to have, even if you're not trained to work with neurodivergence, some understanding so that you know where to signpost if you're met with something you don't understand.
Yeah, and I think one of my frustrations is before I got diagnosed, it was very self-started by me figuring out, like I was diagnosed with depression and then severe anxiety, and I was in therapy for 6 months. And I have to admit, which I don't like to, but at some stage I felt frustrated with the therapist as to all the signs I've shown over 6 months indicate that I have autistic traits. I could be autistic. And on the flip side, she was telling me, if you don't do the homework, you're never going to get better. And I'm like, but I've never been able to do homework. I don't like homework. Like, I'm mentally struggling. I don't want to do homework. And it was that moment. She actually asked me, when was the last time you didn't feel this deeply anxious? And it instantly brought me back, as if like this lived memory, when I was 5 years old on the school bus in Ireland, going to school, sick of anxiety, of going to school and socializing and being around people. And that, in my mind, I was like, I'm fundamentally different. I don't know what it is, how I'm different, but this depression and anxiety is a byproduct of something else. She's not guiding me. I need to figure that out myself. So I stopped going to therapy and spent more time trying to figure out, like, what am I?
Yeah. And I'd been on medication at various points in my life. And I, at some points, definitely needed it. And then at other times, I sort of feel like my body tells me whether I need medication or not. Because there's been times when I've been very low and I've taken antidepressants, and it probably has saved my life. Yeah. But then there's other times where I felt very low or withdrawn or down, and I've taken medication and it hasn't helped me at all. And I'm like, that's not it right now. That's not the solution for me at this moment.
Which is amazing, because it shows how in tune you are with your body. And it's like, there's no stigma around medication. As you said, it did save your life, and in many occasions, and for so many other people there. Yeah. So I think that's powerful. So those shutdowns were a sign that something wasn't right. Yeah. How else did ADHD show up for you that you were like, this is something I need to explore? I might be ADHD.
I mean, I've gone through all the diagnoses as well, because I have all things on my medical records, long history of depression, all of that kind of stuff, which was a surprise to me. I only realised that was on my medical records when I went to Big Brother. And then when I went for the psych assessment, they told me that was on my medical records.
Like, and I was excuse me?
I was like, me? That doesn't, and it didn't, those sorts of explanations, they didn't feel like they described my lived experience. ADHD shows up for me in different ways, in different times. I definitely... And again, there's always a question mark for me about autistic traits versus ADHD. But I definitely have some sensory stuff, some issues around food from a kind of sensory perspective as well. All the usual stuff, executive function, planning, time management. I remember at one point sitting down with a planner and I just couldn't work it out. And it was just, I had to schedule a couple of appointments. And I was thinking, I have a doctorate. I cannot plan whatever this thing is that I'm trying to plan. And my brain was getting all funny, and I just couldn't make sense of things. I was very chaotic when I started out self-employed. So I would leave my work to the very last minute. And the work that I did was always very heavily deadlined with like court deadlines, parole deadlines. That you cannot miss these deadlines. They're not
like, we have a studio recording. Yeah. They're like no joke deadlines.
I just couldn't get going sometimes. I could at the beginning at various points when it was all exciting and new and novel. And then I was leaving things, and then I was staying up for like 48 hours to meet these deadlines and exhausting myself. It was mainly around planning and organisation.
That you're like, this is a red flag.
Something's not right. I was really enjoyed school. I did really well in education. That was my thing to focus on. And the way school worked really well for my brain. It was very much like there's a structure, 9 till 3. I knew what I was doing. The way that teaching was done in schools worked really well for me. I got to university where there's a lot of self-directed study, really struggled. And I went from being like all A stars in everything all the time to getting, relatively low grades at university and thinking about dropping out, which for someone who considered themselves academic and always performed quite well, I couldn't study in that way. And the way the lectures worked, I'd be there in body, but not in mind. And, I did psychology with philosophy for my undergrad, and I loved philosophy. I did that just for the love of it, because I wanted to be a psychologist, but the philosophy, that was just for enjoyment. Yeah. I got to university, and the way the teachers taught it, I was like, this is so boring. Like, how have they made my love so boring? And I remember being pulled into a one-to-one with my allocated tutor, and he was like, you're not performing. Is there something happening for you that might explain why you're underperforming? And I was like, I don't know. I couldn't explain it. And my housemates would come into my room and be like, it's exam time, we're revising, and I'm sat there for hours staring into space.
I won't until 2 hours before.
And I could just be lost in my own thoughts, and having a merry old time in my imagination for hours. Yeah. And then my housemate would come in and be like, you haven't moved and there's nothing on your page. So I knew around the age of sort of 20, 21 that things were not normal. My doctorate took me a lot longer than it should have done. I think I took probably an extra 2 years to qualify than what I should have done, to the point where they nearly kicked me off the course because I had exceeded every deadline. Then they allow a year extra for write-up time. I exceeded that. And I'm thinking, I'm so far down the line with this now. I have to finish it, but I can't get it over the line. Yeah. And it was only the threat of them saying, you are about to fail, that got me to get my thesis in. Yeah. So I knew something was off. But I didn't, for a moment, suspect neurodivergence. And by the way, at this point, I already had my brother who was diagnosed.
Really?
And it still wasn't ringing.
So it was within the family, like you were familiar with it. Because my case is like, I didn't even know what it was. I didn't know anyone that had it. And I was like, well, how could I? I don't know what that is. So you already were familiar with it.
Yeah, and I didn't consider that described my experience. Whereas now, when I assess other people, I'm like mentally thinking, can relate to that, can relate to that, can relate to that. And then I think something probably happened hormonally as well, which is talked about quite a lot in the research these days, that for women, perimenopause is like a big turning point in terms of your hormonal changes. I'm 40 in a couple of weeks. My hormones have changed over the last sort of 5 years or so. And I think that coincides with me having the shutdowns and the really bad experience of overwhelm, where it was no longer possible for me to look normal. Yeah. So in some ways, thank God I was self-employed, because no one bore witness to that.
Yeah, and I think it's something that women in general, neurotypical or neurodivergent women, we obviously fluctuate through the month with emotions and how we're feeling within ourselves and our self-esteem. I don't think, yes, there's a lot more research done on it now, but I don't think it's spoken enough about how that shows up for neurodivergent women, because it's exactly what a neurotypical woman would experience, just on steroids and unmanageable emotions that like, even if you have structures and things in place, you just don't know what to do with it. So
but there's quite a lot of research as well now about PMDD and ADHD. There's quite a big crossover. Yeah. There's a lot of debate about pathologization within the world of neurodivergence, and I'm very cautious about pathologizing things that can be explained in non-medical terms. So I'm not sure about PMDD and the overlap with ADHD, but certainly what we know is that our hormones impact us in different ways if you're neurodivergent. And for women, it's a new and evolving field that hopefully we'll start to learn more about. But definitely, I mean, we were talking outside of the podcast about my experience of taking ADHD medications and how that interacted with me at different times of my cycle. So I did a bit of research and realised that's quite a common experience and why medication didn't work for me, or that particular medication.
So you're hyper aware that, you know, some medications have inhibited you when you're at that time of the month or leading up to. How do you work around that now?
I think that everybody needs to make their own decision about medication. I've worked with lots of people with ADHD, and medication for them is absolutely revolutionary, will change their life, especially men that I've worked with in prison. I've found huge improvements in their behaviour when they've been on medication. I mean, literally night and day difference in terms of keeping them safe in the future. And when I went and did my training to become an ADHD assessor, one of the things they talk about is how treatable ADHD is, which is really, it's great. It's one of the most research areas of psychiatry, is how well ADHD meds work for somebody who is ADHD. However, it's not for everybody, and people react differently with medications, and that was my experience. So first 2 weeks of the month, I was great, flying, super productive, clear thoughts, quiet mind, thought it was going to change my life. And then the luteal phase hit, and I really struggled to manage my emotions. And it came up in anger in me. And I thought,
we're allowed, okay? It's hard enough. It's difficult enough.
And I was thinking, I'm not usually somebody that struggles too much with premenstrual stress or tension. So I gave it a couple more months, and then it was like clockwork. But that time of the month, I was feeling quite enraged. It's like it unlocked something in
my
me.
way.
Yeah. And I came off the Elvance, and it went away. So it was the medication. And, you know, I sometimes think about trying other medications. I did try Ritalin, and I tried it for a couple of weeks and didn't feel any different at all. It's like flicking a Smartie at a hippo. and because I have an ADHD brain, I was like, well, I give up then. So now I'm not on medication. I haven't kept going with it. But, you know, I don't, for anyone that's listening, don't follow me. I'm not the gold standard of managing ADHD. Mine is partially managed at the best of times. And I always say to people, just keep going with the medications, talk to your doctors, try what works for you, because there's so many options out there. I just have the sort of brain that went, well, it hasn't worked straight away, therefore I'm not continuing with it. But I wouldn't recommend that approach.
No, and I think it's the same way as being ADHD or autistic, it's such an individual experience that obviously, whilst it's unfortunate, because when you reach for medication is because you desperately need the help and, you know, managing your brain and being different, and you don't want to be shopping around to find the right one. You want to be given the one that works, and you want it to work yesterday. So I do understand the frustration around it, but it is important to find what is catered for you. And I think as well, like those case studies that you speak about that have proven to be so useful to manage ADHD, they're probably, and I'm speaking it without any context on the research, but I can assume they're more gravitated towards men that don't fluctuate with cycles. And then that goes back into the history of how being neurodivergent was initially based on white little boys. And that's why so many women like us were, you know, only diagnosed later on in life, which actually leads me on to the next point about like how you felt about your diagnosis, because my experience when I got diagnosed with autism was I was seeking the answers. I thought I'd be happy to receive a yes, you're autistic. I felt quite the opposite. I felt so enraged, so angry and embarrassed, and just I felt a deep sense of unfairness, which I'd never felt in my whole life because, I was surviving day to day. I was like, get on with it, get on with it. To then be put in a position at 27, which I'm told you were born with autism, but, guess what? We missed it and we've never told you. I just felt enraged for myself, but also for all the other women that I knew, that my experience wasn't unique. And I really struggled to shift that anger and that emotion. So how did you feel when you got late diagnosed with ADHD?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And I empathize with your experience because I know from my own work with people that are receiving their diagnoses, there can be a period of grieving when you get a diagnosis around, oh, God, I've lived this life with so little understanding of myself and why I've had difficulties. And if I'd known this sooner, what my life had looked like. I didn't really feel like that because I still didn't really acknowledge or accept that was driving too many of my difficulties. I was just like, I'm fine. I'm okay. And I didn't really think about it too much. I kind of felt like I was glad I had the answer. It was kind of affirming in that moment. Now I find it really helpful because I can understand my difficulties and I can communicate them to other people. And I find that it helps me work with neurodivergent people in a far more informed way. But for a long time, even after the diagnosis, I was like, I'm probably fine. Or even asking myself, am I faking it? Or is this real? Do I have a right to acknowledge this part of my personality or identity? Because I'm so privileged in so many ways, I was almost like ashamed to say I'm neurodivergent because I didn't want other people to think that I was claiming an oppression that didn't belong to me. And I felt really guilty about that. So mostly after I got the diagnosis, I just wouldn't tell people. I didn't talk about it. Obviously, people very close to me knew. But even some people close to me, I didn't really talk about it because I felt like I just anticipated the answers around, oh, well, we're all a little bit ADHD, aren't we? And I just couldn't be bothered to get into conversations about it. Yeah. So I did the diagnosis for myself and my own understanding. And it's only really going on Big Brother that forced me to start thinking about it and talking about it because it became one of my storylines. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's a good thing now, but I didn't anticipate necessarily that Big Brother would pick up on that as a storyline for me because I didn't really identify so much with that. It was just part of me, but maybe not that relevant to me. Whereas now I feel like it's really relevant to me.
Yeah, and I think in a world that we think it's not aware about how neurodivergence presents in women, it's funny that you go on this public platform and now it's like, that's your thing. You're neurodivergent and people see that in you. And in reality, you've masked most of your life. Yeah. You've survived most of your life without having that surrounding you. And now you're on a platform and they're like, well, she's neurodivergent.
Yeah. And I think not even just the masking. I definitely masked a lot in my sort of 9-to-5 working life. But outside of that, I created a world that worked for me. And so my neurodivergence, if you like, didn't show up that abundantly clearly because I created a world that I could live in with my friends, with my family, with my lifestyle, with my job, with the hobbies that I had. I never really met people that were probably not neurodivergent. Yeah. No offense to all my friends, but and it was only really going on Big Brother and sort of plunging myself into public life, if you like, where I realized actually there are some differences and they're a bit more obvious than I realized because I hadn't been outside of my little world that I'd created to be able to see myself through other people's eyes.
Yeah, and we'll touch on Big Brother in a minute, but like going back to that little bubble that you created, it's interesting how you didn't feel that part of your identity and having ADHD was too prevalent because let's tell the listeners, she's a forensic psychologist.
Yeah.
How did you get into that field? So obviously you studied psychology.
Yeah.
But what made you want to go down that route?
Pure interest. So I knew I wanted to be a psychologist. I wasn't sure what area I wanted to go into. I was studying psychology at university. And then when I left university, I just got a job as a healthcare assistant in a psychiatric hospital, and it just so happened to be a forensic hospital for people that were within the criminal justice system, but under healthcare settings. And that was where I started to become interested in that side. And then I went back to university and did my master's and my doctorate. And it all sort of went from there, really. And it was something that I found easy to focus on because I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So,
what does a day in the life look like for you? And I'm asking more of this for me because I'm a true crime obsessed. And when I learned that you're a forensic psychologist, I was like, I have so many questions off topic from being neurodivergent that I was like, over coffee, I could chat to you about it for 15 hours. But what would a day in the life look like for you?
So it really depends. Forensic psychology is quite broad. So it depends what area you go into. I went into working with, the terminology is wrong, but loosely mentally disordered offenders. So for a long time, I was working in healthcare settings, hospitals, secure hospitals, for people that were detained under the Mental Health Act, but probably had committed an offence at some point as well. So whether that's NHS or private sector, I was in forensic hospitals for years and years and years and years. And then I started working in NHS services within prisons. And then I became self-employed and was primarily focused on assessing men in prison to see if they were safe to be released. So a day in a life could look very different if I was on a psychiatric ward versus assessing someone in prison to see if they were safe to be released or not. I like the work in hospitals. That would mainly be around helping individuals to understand their offence type. It might be something like anger management. It might be work on trauma, whatever the individual needed in order to be safe enough to be progressed to less secure settings over time.
Okay. We do know that actually a lot of people that are in prison aren't diagnosed neurodivergent. There's a large percentage that potentially that lack of support, of lack of management has led them to do things that there's no justification potentially, but there's a small reasoning to that. But there's also a very high amount of neurodivergent people that are not in full-time employment. Do you think your field and the type of work you do and being a psychologist, is it neurodivergent friendly?
Good question. What to actually practice in my field?
Yeah, just the work that you do. Obviously, you went into it because of you're passionate about it. But I'll give you context to the question because I'm on the look for like, what careers could people that don't have that full-time employment or haven't found their passion, can they go into and not feel instantly burned out in?
You will feel instantly burnt out. And I think anyone in any healthcare setting, any criminal justice setting, whatever it is, the scope for burnout is huge because you're working in massively under-resourced environments where you're expected to have a high level of productivity and you generally don't have at your disposal what you need to do the job well. So that's the first thing. The other thing is that you're working with other people and their emotions all day, every day.
Yeah,
you're working, especially when you work in forensics, if you're working with crime, with people who've committed offences. I only worked with high-risk, high-harm offenders. So people had committed some of the most unimaginable offences. And you are absorbing it all day, every day. So for a neurodivergent person, on the one hand, I think it attracts neurodivergent people. So when I was self-employed, I worked within, I guess you would call it an agency of other psychologists. A lot of us are neurodivergent. And that's because it's so specific. It's the interest and the novelty that has led you there.
Yeah.
But in terms of practically your day-to-day life, I don't think a great career for people who are neurodivergent. I don't know. For me, the burnout was huge.
Yeah,
massive.
I can imagine.
Especially when I left healthcare settings. Because the thing about how I work is when I focus on something, I give it absolutely everything that I've got. Everything I've got. So when I worked in hospital settings, specifically, I was working with women for a long time. And I felt like I gave them my heart and my soul.
100%.
And I would be on the wards from the minute my day started till it ended, and then I'd have to catch up on paperwork and stuff around that.
Yeah.
And I was really invested in their care, really invested in their outcomes, really invested in helping them work through trauma, and there's huge levels of trauma in forensic settings.
Yeah.
I think people don't always understand, especially with the women I worked with. They'd been through awful experiences. So there's, I think, a time limit for how long you can be that emotionally invested in something that's
just
so
difficult.
heavy.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you say that there was a lot of neurodivergent people within that field.
Yeah.
Also, I can assume, which is what you're alluding to, it's so niche.
Yeah.
Right? That only a special interest can really lead you into that, or true passion. But then I think people need to be mindful, as exactly what you're saying, the emotional toll you take on board. There's a limit as to how much someone can take on. And I think also there's a misconception that neurodivergent people don't feel, or we're cold, or don't have emotions. I think it's quite frankly the opposite. We're mega empathetic. We feel a lot. We're just not showing it in the way that neurotypical people would show it. So, okay, really interesting. So you're in this rigorous, mega analytical career, and then one day you decide, let's flip the boat. And you go into something completely different, and you enter the Big Brother house in 2024. So like 2 years ago, shall we say. Did you actually think it through, or was it an impulse?
It was impulsive. I knew I was getting to a point in my career where I wanted to change anyway. And I wouldn't have gone into Big Brother had I been, earlier in my career, fully committed to staying in forensic psychology, because there's a conflict with going on television and then also working in criminal justice settings. But I was ambivalent. I didn't want to necessarily leave forensic psychology, but I felt like I needed some sort of change. I just didn't know what it was. I'd also had a bereavement, so I was in a kind of YOLO phase where I was like, I know I need change, and if not now, when? And it's not that I necessarily thought that Big Brother would lead to the change. It's just that I didn't care if the consequence was that I lost my job or whatever else. I wasn't invested necessarily in my long-term career in forensic psych. So, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%.
But it was just, you know what? I need to fill my life with good experiences. I was grieving. I hadn't long lost my brother. And I just thought, I was doing lots of things that was to try and put goodness in my life or fun in my life. A couple of months before, I'd flown off to Nepal and hiked to Everest Base Camp with a bunch of strangers. And that was really fun. And that was the first time I'd really laughed since my brother died. And in that moment, I felt like, I'm out in nature, I feel connected to other people, and I'm actually laughing again. And before that, I'd been really struggling to get myself out of whatever state I was in. And then I was literally just scrolling on social media, and I saw an advert for Big Brother, and I was like, okay. And then I just clicked it and applied. And I literally recorded my little video audition thing, like basically there and then. And I was like, I probably should put some makeup on or something. And then I was like, nah, fuck it. Like, I am who I am. They may as well take me as I am now rather than planning it all through. And that's what I did. And then, there we go.
I'm so sorry about your brother, by the way. And I know you mentioned that he was on the autistic spectrum, and I'm sure you had that special connection with him that no one really can define if they're not neurodivergent, of course, on top of that being
really close.
Your brother.
Like, we used to joke that we were twins, and when I got my ADHD diagnosis, he was like,
told you.
Yeah, he was like, yes. And he said to me, I feel like this is, we can connect over this now. Because I'd always said to him, actually, when he was looking for answers and trying to feel better, I feel guilty about this, but I felt that he was over-focusing on his neurodivergence. And I felt, not that I was uncaring about that aspect of him, I was just like, there's this area of trauma, actually, that you need to go and think about with some support and some therapy. And I really wanted him to look at that, and he was very set on working out his own ways to make himself feel better. And because of my job as well, I always thought I had the ideas that could save him.
I was going to mention, obviously you have the background and actually the knowledge of how people's brains work. So you had that extra context as well.
Yeah, but I couldn't force him to do what I thought would save him.
Absolutely.
And we clashed sometimes over that. But there was definitely an alliance between us that was quite interesting.
Yeah, the both of you were different in that special way, which is amazing. And okay, so you send that video raw as you are. Obviously, they loved you, and you went into the house. You went on to win, which is bloody incredible. And I do know that you weren't hiding your diagnosis, and you did mention that was a moment that it kind of was brought to light, the fact that you were neurodivergent. How did you being ADHD show up in the house in your experience?
Going into Big Brother, really, it was the first time in a long time I'd actually thought out loud about my neurodivergence. This is why I kind of get a bit frustrated, because there's a bit of a narrative around, oh, she planned that. She was going to use the neurodivergence thing to win and get sympathy. And actually, it hadn't even crossed my mind prior to going in the house that it would be really particularly relevant. I was actually a bit nonchalant. I thought, I work this really high intensity job. I'm in difficult, stressful situations all the time. This is going to be easy.
Walk in the park.
And I thought, and you know, I was thinking, if there's one thing I can do, it's mask. So whatever the situation, I can fake it till I make it. Yeah. Which of course, masking is not being fake, but it's
no.
It's an image of coping.
Yeah, and it's like, I feel like we're chameleons. You throw us into any room and we'll survive. And I spoke about that with another guest as to like interviews as an example. They're performative environments, and we've masked our whole life, which is performing. Yeah. Throw me in one of those, dance. You know, I'll dance for you. So I think for you, it's probably similar with being in the house.
I really thought there's nothing they can throw at me that will stress me out, which now I laugh about it because I'm like, that was so naive. So naive and so stupid. And I went in, and, you know, even in hiding in the hotel beforehand, I was chilling. I was like, I'm kind of tired from work, so it's nice to be in a hotel for a few days, watching stuff on a very restricted iPad. Yeah. And without a phone or access to the outside world. I loved that part, being cocooned and hidden away. And they kept checking on me, are you okay? Are you nervous? And I was like, no. Oh my God. Then because I'd been so nonchalant about how relaxed I was, when it came to it, the overwhelm just hit me like a train, and I stepped out of the car. I remember it so vividly because it suddenly was, there's a crowd and there's lights and there's sound, and I could hear my VT playing, and then they put noise-cancelling headphones on me while giving me verbal instructions, which blows my mind. And I was thinking, what? I was like, I'm going to
Where
walk.
am I?
I was like, I'm going to walk in the wrong direction, probably. And in my head, I was thinking, I've got terrible posture, so remember to put your shoulders back when you walk in. And it's raining and you're wearing heels, so don't fall over. So all I remember thinking was just walk in and don't fall over. But I was completely overwhelmed, and I think I left my body. And I was like, okay. And then I, once I got in the house, I couldn't remember the walk-in. It was like, because it was all so strange and overwhelming. And then I was mortified and really embarrassed, thinking I'd messed it up. In the house, I just, I can't explain how it felt, but it was just like being hit with a wall of something very difficult. Lights, sounds, new people that were being very, very loud and extroverted.
And social dynamics as well, right?
Yeah. And I just suddenly went into myself, and then I thought, well, I better tell them I'm neurodivergent, because otherwise they're going to think I'm really rude. But they thought I was really rude anyway. So it didn't really help me.
Nothing new for us neurodivergent people.
I said, I think the words I said was, if I come across as a bit strange, it's just because I'm a bit overwhelmed or whatever else. But
yeah. And I think that later on, you struck a great friendship with Lily, who you're both ADHD, and I think that dynamic was special within the house. Yeah. I have this theory about neurodivergent people that we just gravitate towards each other. Did you think that happened with Lily, and do you think that's true?
I think it's true, and it's something that's anecdotally spoken about in the neurodivergent world all the time, is that there's something, you can see neurodivergence in other people and you can connect to them, whatever that is. For me, it's something about authenticity, and that's what I saw in Lily. I spotted Lily's neurodivergence a mile off.
We usually do.
And I was a bit confused because she was saying that she wasn't, and people were asking her, and she was saying she wasn't. So I never spoke about it with her in the house, because I thought, who am I to...
Oh, you never did? So you never established before that friendship forged that you both had a different brain?
No. She was saying explicitly, I'm not And
she obviously knew, did she?
She knew, yeah. She had her own reasons for saying that. And it was something around shame and stigma and the way she has had people treat her entire life. And her reaction was like, no, I'm not. Don't put that label on me. That's how she felt. And that was what she was saying in the house. So I heard that and I thought, okay. But I felt a desire to protect Lily because I could see that people were being hostile towards her right from the beginning. And I don't know how much the show really showed of it, but I clocked facial expressions and side eyes and just a few little comments where I felt like she's there's a potential here for her to make herself or for her to become vulnerable in a house that is desperate to maintain status quo and unity because that's what feels safe in those group dynamics. And I could see that maybe she would end up on the outside. Incidentally, it was me that ended up a bit on the outside. But I really didn't want her to have that experience. And obviously, my age, I've grown up in the eras of reality TV where people have not survived it and with the backlash afterwards have, taken their lives and stuff.
I watched yesterday America's Next Top Model on Netflix and it goes into off topic, but the era of when skinny was trendy and the horrific comments and things they were saying. But
when you watch back now, it's absolutely appalling.
It's gobsmacking. And it's like we struggled to justify that now that we know more, but we need to have context that was 20 years ago. Doesn't make it any better. No. It's still horrific. But I think, reality TV has also gone through
it has evolved since those times, and it definitely needed to. But I just, in my head, calculated a few things. One was her age and how formative that period of time in her 100%. Life is going to be. And I didn't want her to go through the experience and come out not liking who she was. So I was determined to bolster her in any way I could. And I wanted to protect her from how damaging that experience could be, because I just felt a bit worried. And I liked her. She's nice, she's funny, she's sweet, she's endearing. And what people don't always pick up on with Lily is that she's actually really emotionally intelligent and can read people. Like, she can see through anybody. She just won't always use the same language that I use to explain things. But there is more similarities between us than I think people realise. We got some sort of negative comments about our friendship. People thought it was really weird. I've had quite a lot of trolling about it. And obviously, because I'm gay as well, there are accusations of grooming and things like that. But for me,
what did they find weird about the friendship, though? Could they not see the protectiveness, the nurturing, the empath in you wanting to coddle that vulnerability instead of seeing it weird?
Well, I guess it's complicated, isn't it? Because people who haven't been cared for or looked after may be distrusting of being presented with a visual of that. Everyone has their own reasons for feeling negative about something. I think there's some stuff around me being a gay woman as well. It was perceived as, a strange power dynamic in terms of age and other things. And I got called a groomer, as gay people are quite accustomed to being called. But for me, it was very simple. I'd had a younger brother who was neurodivergent and had felt so completely alone in the world. He eventually took his life. And I was now faced with someone younger than me who was very obviously neurodivergent and in a house that was very divided and there was lots of animosity at times.
Wow. And I think it's that hyper focus that people might have on a part of your personality of you being gay and the fact that, can you not have a girlfriend? A friend that you forged the same way? If you have a boyfriend, they wouldn't be commenting on that dynamic between the both of you. I think it's the scrutiny of being in the public eye that people have the right to comment on whatever they want, however they want. And that's just really difficult because what people don't realize, I think, and I use an example, right? You're on social media. I started doing content as well. And by openly saying we're neurodivergent or you saying you're gay, those are things that you can't see on someone, right? We're putting ourselves in a position in which people can pass comment and can pass judgment. Versus if I was making cooking videos, you can tell me my lasagna is shit. So be it. I'll live today, okay? You're not going to ruffle any feathers. If you tell me say people tell you you're a groomer or you're faking your neurodivergence, those are deep cutting things that like affect you as a person. And I think, yes, you're in the public eye, but people have this right to comment on whatever they want, which is they don't realize the damage and the repercussions they can have, really, can they?
I think it's tricky. I mean, I will say, I assume those views are in the minority. One, because I won, so there must have been someone supporting me.
I just love that was your experience throughout the house, and then you went on to win. There's no, I can curse, I guess, where we can beep it out, but there's no bigger fuck you than that. So I'm proud of you for that.
I think, and the vast majority of people saw my friendship with Lily and were like, we get it.
Yeah.
We understand how cute, and they liked it and they shipped us, and that was really nice. So that was, I think, the majority view. It's these other views sort of trickle through. And when you first come out of an experience like Big Brother, you're overwhelmed with those opinions.
Yeah.
For me, different things affect me at different times. I would say on the whole, and to be really frank, I don't really give a fuck about the average Joe on the street.
Yeah.
I've read all those comments. Those ones didn't really affect me too much. When something's really, really, really untrue, it's hard to be offended by it because it's just so nonsensical. For me, the bit that was difficult was, I think, the fact that conflicts in the house continued outside the house, and I didn't want to be part of that, with sort of discussions happening online. And I had a couple of strange things happen to me, sort of not involving housemates or Big Brother, but as a consequence of going on Big Brother in my personal life, some odd things happened that were difficult to manage. And I don't know, something happens when you go on TV where people think, some people become very resentful and want to lie or spread rumors. And those things were very difficult to navigate. And it was all happening at the same time. And then you get the odd comment through on social media that's just like, wow.
And I think that like what you're spreading there is awareness, really, as to like going on Big Brother or going on TV or sharing your life online is great, but people need to be mindful of potentially the consequences, especially if you're neurodivergent. We are that extra more sensitive on certain things.
But people don't care. That's the point. They feel entitled because they're like, you put yourself out there. You knew what you were getting yourself into. Therefore, you are now available as a punching bag for me. And that's what it is. It's people who are not happy in their own lives. So mostly when I read these comments, I just think, you are obviously deeply unhappy. I've tried to engage with a couple of people that have trolled me, and it's become very clear quite quickly that they're not stable. And then I felt really bad for confronting them because it's all unraveled. And then I think, oh my God, now that's not the right thing to do because this doesn't come from a happy place. But they don't care because they feel that they have the right because you put yourself out there.
Yeah. And I've made that mistake myself of like seeing a comment and it's just gotten me at the wrong time, wrong place. And they're usually the comments of like, you're faking it. If you've lasted your whole life without being diagnosed, how could you? You're taking resources from kids. And I just, whilst very short time sharing content, I've learned that like just there's always going to be that uneducated group of people out there that is just not worth engaging with, because the overwhelming amount of people are positive, are encouraging and are open to seeing more representation of being neurodivergent. So I think that's the positive part.
And it is the minority of people. It's just that that minority can be very vicious. But you can get the sweetest, most innocent content creator who, like you said, is making a baking video. And some of their comments will be absolutely vile. And that's nothing to do with neurodivergence or this or that.
It's the nature of the internet.
It's social media world where people feel that from behind a screen they can get out some of the anger that they have inside of them and use that person as their target.
Okay, so you exited the house and you've navigated that, and I think you've navigated a lot of different environments and pressures and emotions whilst being neurodivergent and having ADHD. How do you manage your ADHD right now?
Good question. I really struggled coming out of Big Brother. I was really, by that point, very burnt out and overwhelmed. And in the Big Brother house, you're on a different sleep cycle. So they keep you up at night. You're very tired.
Do they?
Yeah, you're not on a normal...
You wouldn't catch me doing that. I'd be like, they'll kick me out day 2.
Yeah, you're not on a normal sleep schedule. And I don't think people realise this as well. You're really, really hungry, and you're also essentially jet lagged because you're suddenly on a different time zone. So it is quite stressful. There's lots of lights, and you don't have control over when you can switch lights off or whatever else, or control how much sound is being put into your brain at all times. So when I came out of the Big Brother house, I was really, really, really burnt out.
Yeah.
I'm really, really, really depressed. And that was, I think, at the height of my being trolled era. Yeah. And now I look back, if that happened to me now, I wouldn't care.
Yeah.
And it's stopped now. But at the time, I was in a really bad place. So I would sort of be rotting all day in my hoodie, and then there would be an event in the evening that I'd get ready for, put on my makeup.
And you look like everything's grand, but deep down you've really struggled all day.
Put a smile on. And I didn't want to admit I was struggling because I knew there were people that hated me.
Yeah. It's the spitefulness that I love.
And I was like, no, I will absolutely make sure you know that I'm living the high life right now, which of course I was in moments, and it was fantastic, and I had some really incredible experiences. But I was not well, I don't think, for a while. And it took me a while. It actually took me coming through the other side to realise how bad I'd been. And me and Lily shared that experience. So we would FaceTime each other in the day and rotting in our pyjamas, thinking I've got to go out in 2 hours and look nice and happy and all of this. But how I'm managing my ADHD now is I had some coaching myself, actually.
Amazing.
So I tried medication earlier last year. Didn't really feel like it worked out for me. I had some ADHD coaching myself towards the end of last year, which was helpful, just 6 weeks. I'm starting new area of work, which is my own ADHD coaching of other people and assessments for other people. And it's that really, getting into that, which has given me this kind of new lease of life. And I think it's not so much about how am I managing my ADHD, it's about how do I turn the key in the ignition. Because once I get one thing going, everything else will follow.
Yeah.
So once I'd refound a new passion in my life to follow after kind of languishing for a while and not knowing what I was doing, that got me really excited and interested. And then I started going back to the gym here and there.
Yeah, it's fascinating how it's all connected, isn't
it was then a bit of a ripple effect of, well, I feel better. I'm like, maybe my dopamine's functioning a bit better. I'm not sure because I've got this thing that I'm really enjoying. And now other parts of my life are coming together. I'll go back to the gym and then my diet gets a bit better and it all sort of ripples really. I have lots of little strategies that I use to manage my ADHD, which are probably a bit long to go into. But I'm just trying to make a mental note of what works for me and put it into practice as I go.
And I guess if people want those little notes, they can go to your ADHD coaching. Right? That's where they can find those tips. Okay, so we're going to shift the gears a little bit. And every guest that sits down with me goes through a quick fire round question. So we do things in threes around here because we're obviously the odd ones out. So things of threes. And they're going to be 3 questions. No overthinking, okay? Just whatever comes out. You ready?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, first one. Hyperfocus. Is it a blessing or burnout?
Hyperfocus, for me, I would say blessing, because that's when I get stuff done.
I agree.
Gives me energy, feels really good. Don't worry about the crash off at the end.
It's coming.
Just enjoy the hyperfocus while it's there.
And I feel there's something that you feel unstoppable when you're just like...
You're flying.
For 4 hours, you're like smashing all the life admin you've neglected for 3 months. And you're like, I'm incredible, without acknowledging the fact that it's been done for so long.
You haven't eaten for 8 hours and you're about to faint, but fine.
Yeah, who cares about water? Second, impulsivity. Is it career making or chaos?
I'm going to say, for me, it's been career making because I think I have really benefited from being someone who can change their goals as they go, switch directions. So if something happens that gets in the way of my career or something that I'm doing, cool, I'll find a new direction.
Yeah.
And I think the impulsivity, maybe it's more spontaneity.
Yeah.
that I would experience that I find really helpful.
And I think many times that impulsivity within ADHD is looked down on, as in like you're brass, you speak too quickly, you don't think. But in reality, it's that ability to pivot when you really need to without overthinking that can create great things, from business to relationships to whatever that might be. So I do think it's excellent. As a chronic overthinker here, I would love to have a bit more of that spark of like, who cares? I'm going to do it anyways and just go ahead with it.
The best things that I've achieved in my life have come through being impulsive. You know, I, at 30, quit my job and traveled the world on my own. Just put all my belongings in my family's garages. And I left. And it took me, there was a bit of planning because I had to save for quite a long time before I got to that point. But the decision to just up and go, I mean, and, I've had days where I came back for a job interview at one point, and then I was at my sister's house in the morning and I said, I'm going to Brazil. And I was gone by 5 p.m.
You better wrap up whatever you're saying because I've a plane to catch.
And she was like, you're making me anxious. What do you mean? And I was like, well, I never finished my trip because I had to come home for this job interview. And you know what, I'm going to go back. And so to go to Nepal as well, or like I made an impulsive decision once to run the marathon from like no training. And then the impulsivity was the putting myself into the ballot. And then obviously then I had to do all the training on all the other bits.
Of course. Well, like that's the thing. I said I would never do a marathon again, but I still put my name in the hat.
And so I can't regret the impulsivity. It's what has led me to lead an interesting life and a novel life, I think.
I love that. And that's a great takeaway for people that just struggle with labeling that impulsivity or what it looks like for them. Okay, last one. One thing you really love about having ADHD.
Oh, do I love this? I had a thought that immediately came to my mind. Then I was like, do I love or hate this? It's a real stereotype of ADHD, but the pattern recognition. And of course, that's not part of the diagnostic criteria. There's a bit of speculation about how much of that is ADHD or not. But for me, I do quite like that I can meet people and assess them, if you like, quite quickly. I mean, it's helped me in my career. My job for a long time was assessing people.
Yeah.
So it's really helped me to be good at my job and good at what I do. The downside is sometimes I can clock on to things about people a bit early and then people think I'm a bit mean.
I feel like it's ADHD people predict the future in many ways. It's like you identify things that it takes neurotypical people much longer to get there. And it's that period of people adapting until they get where you've already predicted that you're hated on until they catch up with what you were saying, right?
And that period can be very frustrating, or you can sort of doubt yourself or think, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. I have no reason to think this about this person. But over time, I've learned to sink into and really trust my judgment because I've proven myself right.
Absolutely. 100%.
It sounds a bit arrogant, but
no, it's facts.
Yeah.
Okay, we're coming to an end. And I want your help to speak to the listeners that might have ADHD and want to forge a career but struggle to harness that ambition or that passion that they have. What would you like them to hear?
I don't think there's one thing that you can tell to somebody who's neurodivergent to help them to get into something that would be good for them. What I would say is work first on any feelings of shame that you have about who you are and how you function and how you work, and really sit into that self-exploration and self-understanding before you even think about work or this or that. Because when we start to think about goals, that shuts down the prefrontal cortex and, it activates the part of the ADHD brain that goes into shutdown where we see the executive dysfunction. So I would say, first of all, sit with any feelings of self-talk that's critical or negative that could be getting in the way of you even having these kinds of thoughts or conversations, and lean into the parts of yourself that you love and feel comfortable with and the experiences in life that you've had as a result of your neurodivergence. And I say that without meaning to do a disservice to how hard it can be sometimes. Sit with those feelings, challenge them a little bit, and then maybe when you can reach a point of being kinder to yourself, the rest will follow. When you're able to accept yourself, then you can start thinking about, okay, now I like myself. What can I do with my life? Where can I go to work? What can I do? Who can I meet?
That's amazing. Great advice. Lastly, give me one person that's neurodivergent that you would love to see on the Spicy Brain podcast.
Spicy Brain podcast. Lily, she's always a good one. She speaks much more openly about her neurodivergence now, and it's lovely to hear her kind of grow and flourish and learn about herself.
Yeah.
Even Ben, who does the Hidden 20 podcast, he's always interviewing people.
Yeah.
So it might be nice to hear him being interviewed.
You want to flip the switch there for him, see him on the hot seat.
Yeah. I think he'd be a really interesting person to listen to as well.
Okay, well, we'll send him that request his way. Ali, all I want to say is thank you so much for sitting down with me. I think one of the hardest parts of being a neurodivergent woman and late diagnosed as we are is that lack of representation.
Yeah.
And especially highlighting what a career could look like and what a successful career could look like. So I hope that this conversation, and I know it will be useful for so many listeners to shift that narrative. So genuinely, thank you for being so open about it.
Thank you for having me.